I was right in the middle of my favorite show, sitting in the recliner I'd paid off 20 years ago. Suddenly, the screen went black. My daughter-in-law, Monica, stood there with the remote in her hand, pointing it like a weapon. "Get out, Joyce," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "This is our living room now. We need the space. You've got 24 hours to find a new place." My son, David, stood behind her, staring at the carpet like it was the most interesting thing in the world. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked out the front door without saying a single word. The next morning, a silver sedan pulled up to the driveway, and a man with a briefcase stepped out. He wasn't there for tea. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of Mama Joyce's Chronicles community for more inspiring stories. Now let's get back to the moment the silence broke my heart. That evening, the quiet in the house felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I was sitting in my beige recliner, nursing a cup of tea that had gone cold. The house smelled of lemon polish and old books, a smell I had cultivated over 40 years of living here. My husband, Frank, had built the bookshelves in this room with his own hands before he passed. This was my sanctuary. This was where my joints stopped aching and I could just breathe. The front door didn't open. It flew open. Monica marched in first, her heels clicking aggressively on the hardwood floors I had scrubbed on my hands and knees since 1985. She didn't look at me. She looked around the room like she was measuring it for new curtains. Behind her came my son, David. He was carrying grocery bags, but he looked like he was carrying the weight of the world. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes glued to his sneakers. I didn't move. I just watched them. Monica stepped right in front of the television, blocking my view. She snorted, a sound of pure disgust seeing me resting there. She snatched the remote off the side table and stabbed the power button. The room plunged into silence. "Get out," she repeated, louder this time. "David and I talked. We're expecting a baby. We need this room for a nursery. You're 60, Joyce. There are plenty of senior centers that would take you. This house is for a growing family." The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. I could hear Monica's breathing, fast, entitled, arrogant. She stood there with her hands on her hips, as if her shouting had suddenly transferred the deed to her name. Slowly, very slowly, I shifted my eyes to David. He was standing in the archway of the dining room. His knuckles were white as he gripped the plastic bags. I waited. I waited for him to drop the bags. I waited for him to say, "Monica, stop! That's my mother! This is her home!" I waited for the boy I raised to show up. David shifted his weight, looked at Monica, then back at the floor. He mumbled something I could barely hear. "Mom, maybe it's for the best, less space to clean." That mumble hit me harder than a physical blow. Monica's shout was just noise, but my son's silence, that was betrayal. A cold, sharp clarity washed over me. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was the feeling of waking up from a long, confusing dream. 30 years of managing the payroll at a logistics company teaches you one thing: feelings don't hold up in court. Paperwork does. I stood up. My knees popped, a dry, loud sound in the quiet room. Monica smirked, crossing her arms. She thought she had won. She thought I was getting up to pack my bags, to weep, to beg them for a corner in the basement. In her world, I was just an old piece of furniture that expired. I walked right past her. I didn't even blink. I walked past David, who flinched as if I expected to slap him. I didn't touch him. He wasn't worth the energy. I walked down the hall to my bedroom. I didn't lock the door. I didn't throw myself on the bed to cry. I walked to my closet, knelt down, and pulled out a heavy, fireproof lockbox from underneath my winter coats. I spun the dial. Left, right, left. Click. The lid opened. Inside, smelling of old paper and security, lay a blue folder. My fingers brushed the edges. The deed of trust, the original bill of sale, a living trust document. Owner, Joyce A. Miller, sole beneficiary. I looked in the mirror above my dresser. I saw my gray hair, my comfortable cardigan, my reading glasses. I looked like a harmless grandma who bakes cinnamon rolls and knits scarves. That was my camouflage. As long as the grandma keeps quiet, the wolves think she's dinner. But they forgot that grandmas are the ones who survived the winters. I could hear the TV blaring in the living room again. Monica had put on some reality show, turning the volume up way too high. I could hear her laughing, a sharp, grating sound. She was already celebrating. I took the blue folder and slipped it into my oversized tote bag. Then I reached for my phone. My hands were steady. I wasn't shaking from fear. I was shaking from the adrenaline of a plan falling into place. I scrolled down to a number I hadn't used in 5 years. Robert P. Vance, a state attorney. I pressed call. Joyce? His voice was raspy but sharp. It's 8 p.m. Is everything all right? I need you tomorrow morning, Bob. 8 a.m. sharp. Bring the eviction notices. Plural. Eviction? But Joyce, you live with your son. Exactly. And tomorrow, I'm cleaning house. I hung up the phone and listened to the noise from the living room. Monica was shouting something to David about painting the walls gray. I smiled, a small, cold smile. They were planning a future in a house that was about to reject them like a bad organ transplant. I wasn't leaving. I was just getting started. But first, I had to survive the night without tipping my hand. I needed to walk back out there and play the part of the defeated old woman one last time. I adjusted my glasses, grabbed my purse, and opened the bedroom door. The hallway seemed longer than usual. I could see them through the doorway. Monica with her feet up on my coffee table, drinking my soda. She didn't know it yet, but her clock was ticking, and I was holding the stopwatch. What I didn't expect was what Monica would say when I walked back into the room, a comment so cruel that it made me realize that legal papers weren't enough. I needed to teach them a lesson they would feel in their bones. I walked back into the living room, my tote bag heavy on my shoulder. Monica looked up from her phone, rolled her eyes, and let out a dramatic sigh. "Going somewhere?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or are you just pacing around like a lost puppy?" I didn't answer. I just walked toward the front door. My hand was on the knob when Monica dropped the bomb. She kicked the footrest of my green recliner, the one Frank had spent his last months in. "And hey," she called out, "since you're leaving, take this dusty old chair with you. It smells like sick people. I don't want my baby crawling around near that junk. We're putting it on the curb tomorrow." My hand froze on the doorknob. That chair wasn't junk. It was where Frank held David as a baby. It was where he held my hand when the doctor gave us the bad news. To her, it was trash. To me, it was a memory she had no right to touch. I didn't turn around. If I had, I might have screamed, and screaming is for people who have no power. I just opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. "Don't hurry back," David's voice floated out, weak and trying too hard to please his wife. I shut the door. Click.
That sound was the most satisfying thing I'd heard all day. It was the sound of a period being put at the end of a very long, very bad sentence. I walked down the driveway, past David's truck, which I paid the insurance on, and got into my paid-off sedan. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. Now was the time for math. I drove 3 miles to the Holiday Inn Express. I didn't need luxury. I needed a command center. The receptionist smiled at me. A genuine smile, not the sneer I'd been living with for 3 years. "Just one night?" she asked. "Maybe a few," I said, handing over my credit card. "I'm renovating my life." Up in the room, the silence was beautiful. No TV blaring reality shows, no Monica complaining about the brand of peanut butter I bought, just the hum of the air conditioner. I sat at the small desk, opened my laptop, and pulled out a notepad. I logged into my bank account. The numbers stared back at me. Netflix, $15.99, David's profile. Uber Eats, $45, Monica's lunch. Gas station, $60. Xbox Live, $15. I scrolled through months of transactions. I wasn't just their mother. I was their ATM. I was the silent investor in a business that treated me like an unpaid intern. I picked up my pen and wrote, Step 1, the legal notice. Step 2, the utilities. Step 3, the cards. I didn't cancel anything yet. Not tonight. Tonight, let them enjoy their victory. Let them watch their TV and eat their takeout on my dime one last time. Surprise works best when the target is comfortable. I slept like a baby that night. For the first time in years, I wasn't listening for their arguments or tiptoeing to the bathroom. I woke up at 7 a.m., showered, and put on my best navy blue blazer. I didn't look like grandma anymore. I looked like the payroll manager who fired people for stealing company time. At 7:45 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Bob, the lawyer. "I'm parked down the street, Joyce. You sure about this? It's going to get ugly." "I'm counting on it," I replied. "Serve them the papers. I'll be there in an hour to collect my things. And Bob, don't be nice." "Understood." I poured myself a coffee from the hotel machine and watched the clock. 7:59, 7:58, 8 o'clock. Right about now, the doorbell at my house would be ringing. Monica was probably still in her pajamas, expecting an Amazon package. David was probably nursing a hangover. They were about to get a wake-up call that no amount of coffee could fix. I sipped my drink, imagining the scene. But I didn't know that Monica had one more nasty trick up her sleeve, something she had done to the house overnight that would make eviction look like a mercy. When I finally pulled into the driveway an hour later, I gasped at what I saw on the front lawn.
My green velvet recliner was upside down in the middle of the wet grass. One of the wooden legs was snapped clean off, sticking up like a broken bone. The sprinklers had evidently gone off in the morning, soaking the fabric that Frank used to fall asleep on. Beside it were 3 cardboard boxes, soggy and collapsing, with my clothes spilling out into the mud. I parked my car at the curb, turned off the engine, and just sat there for a moment. My hands gripped the steering wheel. I wasn't shaking anymore. I was calcifying. I was turning into stone. Standing on the porch was Bob, looking like a shark in a $2,000 suit. He was holding a clipboard. Facing him was Monica, wearing a silk robe I bought her for Christmas, her hair a mess, screaming so loud the neighbors across the street were peeking through their blinds. David was nowhere to be seen. Typical. I opened my car door. The click of my heels on the pavement sounded like gunshots in the morning quiet. As I approached, Monica's screeching became coherent words. "You can't do this! I'm pregnant! We have tenant rights! This is illegal eviction!" Bob adjusted his glasses, looking bored. He held up a hand, palm out. "Ma'am, you are not a tenant. You don't pay rent. You don't have a lease. You are a guest at will, and the owner has just revoked her will." "I live here," Monica shouted, spitting a little. "My mail comes here." "And your mail can go to a PL box starting tomorrow," Bob said smoothly. He saw me approaching and nodded. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller." Winnick whipped her head around. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed into slits. She stomped down the porch steps, ignoring the mud splashing onto her bare feet. "You," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger in my face. "You called a lawyer on your own son? You're sick. We were just joking about the room. We were going to let you stay in the guest room." "The chair," I said calmly, looking past her at the ruin on the lawn. "Was that a joke, too?" She faltered for a second, then sneered. "It's trash. I was doing you a favor, decluttering." "That chair," I said, my voice low and steady, "was the last thing my husband bought. It was worth more to me than this entire house." I turned my gaze to her, making sure she saw the ice in my eyes. "And you just threw it in the mud." "So what? You're gonna cry?" "No," I said. "I'm going to evict you." I walked past her, up the steps to where Bob was waiting. "Notice served?" I asked. "Served and signed. 30 days to vacate. If they aren't out by noon on the 30th, the sheriff removes them physically. I also included the clause about damages." "Good." "Mom!" David finally appeared in the doorway. He looked pale, wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. "Mom, please. She's hormonal. Don't do this. Where are we supposed to go?" I looked at my son, the boy I paid college tuition for, the man who stood by while his wife threw his father's chair in the dirt. "You have jobs, David. You have savings. Or at least, you told me you did when you couldn't pitch in for the electric bill last month." He looked down, his face flushing red. 30 days, I repeated. Tick-tock. I turned to Bob. "I need to get my checkbook and my jewelry box from the master bedroom. Then I'm leaving." "I'll escort you," Bob said, stepping between me and Monica, who was storming back up the stairs. I walked into the house. The air inside felt different now. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a battlefield. I headed straight for the master bedroom. I wanted to grab my things and get out before I lost my temper. But as I passed the kitchen, I stopped dead in my tracks. The refrigerator door was wide open, the alarm beeping softly. But that wasn't what stopped me. On the kitchen island, there was a stack of papers, my bank statements, my pension letters, my private financial documents. They were torn out of the filing cabinet I kept in the study, a cabinet that was supposed to be locked. Monica had been busy while I was at the hotel. She hadn't just thrown out my chair. She had been hunting. I walked over to the island. On top of the stack was a sticky note in Monica's handwriting. It had a sum written on it, $145,000. Next to it, she had written one word, jackpot. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. They weren't just being mean. They were calculating my net worth. They thought they had found the vein. I grabbed the papers, my hands trembling with rage. That's when I heard a noise from the hallway, a low, rhythmic scratching sound coming from behind the locked door of the study. "David," I called out, my voice sharp, "what is in the study?" David wouldn't look at me. Monica leaned against the doorframe, a smug, dangerous smile returning to her face. "Oh, don't worry about the study, Joyce. We just started the renovations early. Since you're kicking us out, we figured we'd take what's ours." I pushed past her and unlocked the study door. My breath caught in my throat. What I saw in that room made the broken chair on the lawn look like a minor inconvenience. This was personal. This was war, and they had just made their biggest mistake yet. The door swung open, and the smell of drywall dust hit me instantly. David was on his knees in the corner, behind where the desk used to be. He was holding a crowbar, sweat dripping down his forehead.
He had pried off the baseboard and was hacking away at the plaster. He wasn't renovating, he was trying to break into the wall safe Frank had installed 20 years ago. "David," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a razor. He jumped, dropping the crowbar with a loud clang. He looked like a deer caught in headlights, guilty, terrified, and pathetic. We lost the key," he stammered, wiping his dusty hands on his pants. "I needed my birth certificate for the insurance." "Liar," I said. Monica pushed past me into the room. "Oh, stop it, Joyce. It's David's money anyway. You're sitting on a fortune while we're struggling. We're just taking an advance on his inheritance." "Inheritance?" I looked at her, then at the hole in my wall. "I'm not dead, Monica, but your access to my wallet is." Bob stepped into the room. He didn't say a word, he just took out his phone and snapped a picture of David holding the crowbar next to the damaged wall. Click, click. "That's destruction of property and attempted burglary," Bob said casually, checking the photo. "Since the total value of the safe's contents exceeds $5,000, that's a felony. David, do you want to leave in an Uber or a squad car?" David scrambled to his feet, backing away from the wall. "I didn't steal anything. The safe is still locked." "Keep it that way," Bob warned. "Mrs. Miller, grab what you need. I'm calling a locksmith to change the house codes immediately after we leave. If they try this again, the alarm triggers a direct line to the police." I walked over to the closet shelf, grabbed my jewelry box, the one with my mother's pearls, and my checkbook. I didn't look at David. I couldn't. Looking at him hurt too much. The boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard was gone. In his place was this sweaty, greedy stranger holding a crowbar. "Let's go, Bob," I said. "The air in here is toxic." We walked out. Monica screamed insults at my back, calling me selfish, a hoarder, a bitter old hag. I kept walking. My heels clicked on the pavement. I put my things in the car, shook Bob's hand, and drove away. Back at the Holiday Inn, I sat on the edge of the bed. I felt drained, but my mind was sharp. The jackpot note, the crowbar, the broken chair, it was all proof that they didn't see me as a person. They saw me as an obstacle to their payday. I opened my notebook to a fresh page. Step 1, legal notice, done. Step 2, the utilities. I picked up my phone. It was time to make the house go dark. I dialed the electric company first. "Hi, I'm the account holder for 42 Oak Street. I'm requesting a temporary suspension of service for repairs. Yes, immediately." Next, the cable and internet. "Disconnect it. No, don't transfer it. Just cut it." Finally, the gas. I imagined the scene. Monica trying to watch her reality shows. Click, black screen. David trying to play his video games. Network error. The air conditioning humming to a halt as the house slowly started to heat up. They wanted the house, they could have it, but they were going to learn that a house doesn't run on entitlement, it runs on bills, and I was done paying them. I ordered a club sandwich from room service and turned on the TV. For the first time in forever, I watched what I wanted to watch. No cartoons, no loud action movies, just a cooking show about making the perfect risotto. I was halfway through my sandwich when my phone buzzed. It was a text from David. "Mom, the power is out. The Wi-Fi is gone. Monica is freaking out. You can't do this." I didn't reply. I took a bite of my sandwich. It tasted like victory. But then my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text. It was a fraud alert from my credit card company. A notification popped up on the screen and my heart stopped. Transaction declined, $4,500 at Baby Bliss Superstore. I stared at the screen. They weren't just trying to break into the safe, they had authorized users on my emergency card, the one I kept for hospital visits, and they were trying to max it out before I could cut them off. I was about to call the bank to freeze it when another notification pinged, and then another. But this third notification wasn't a decline, it was an approval, and it wasn't for a baby store. It was for something that made my blood run cold and revealed the darkest secret David had been keeping from me for years.
The notification glowed on my screen, bright and terrifying. Approved. $2,000, Red Rock Casino online. I stared at the phone. It wasn't a baby store. It wasn't a hospital bill. My son, who claimed he was saving for his family, had just blown $2,000 in 10 seconds on a gambling app. Now, let's face the ugly truth. My hands shook as I dialed the number on the back of my card. "This is the fraud department," a robotic voice answered. I navigated the menu until I got a human. "Freeze it," I said, my voice trembling. "Freeze everything. My card was stolen." "I can certainly help with that, Mrs. Miller," the operator said. "I see a pattern of similar transactions here. Red Rock Casino, BetMGM, DraftKings. These go back 6 months. Did you authorize the charges totaling $40,000 over the last year?" The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "40,000?" I whispered. "Yes, ma'am. They were all authorized with your PIN." The room spun. David didn't just have a bad week, he had an eviction. The savings he and Monica talked about, the money for the nursery, it didn't exist. It never existed. He had been siphoning my money, his money, and probably every penny he could borrow, feeding it into a digital slot machine. That jackpot note on the kitchen island made sense now. It wasn't just greed, it was desperation. They weren't trying to steal my money to renovate, they were trying to steal it to cover a hole so deep they couldn't see the sky anymore. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of the hotel room. I felt sick. My son wasn't just a disrespectful brat, he was a thief and a liar. I called Bob immediately. "Bob, run a debt check on David right now." "Joyce, it's late." "Do it. I need to know who is coming for him." 10 minutes later, Bob called back. His voice was serious. "Joyce, you need to listen to me. David has 3 liens on his truck. He has a judgment against him from a credit union for 10 grand. And there's a pending lawsuit from a private lender, a loan shark, basically. Joyce, he owes over 100 grand to people who don't send polite letters." I closed my eyes. The pieces of the puzzle clicked together. The sudden aggression, the demand for the house, the crowbar. David wasn't trying to kick me out because he hated me. He was trying to take the house because he needed an asset to sell or leverage before his legs got broken. "He's drowning, Bob," I said softly. "He is," Bob agreed, "and he's trying to use you as a life raft, but if you let him, he'll pull you down with him. You lose the house, the pension, everything." "I know," I said. The mother in me wanted to run to him, to fix it, but the survivor in me, the woman who had just been thrown out on the street, knew better. You don't hand a drowning man your wallet. You throw him a rope, or you let him swim. "Keep the eviction moving," I told Bob, "and add a clause. I want a full forensic audit of my accounts. If he took 40,000, I want it back, or I press charges for elder financial abuse." "That's a felony, Joyce. That sends him to prison." "He built his own cell," I said, my voice cracking just a little. "Now he has to live in it." I hung up. I thought the worst was over. I thought knowing the secret was the hardest part. I was wrong. My phone rang again. It wasn't Bob. It wasn't David. It was the landline from my house. I stared at the screen. Why would they call me? They knew I wasn't coming back. I slid the bar to answer. "Hello?" "Joyce!"
It was Monica. She wasn't screaming this time. She was whispering, and she sounded terrified. "Joyce, you have to come home. Please, there's a man here. He's in the driveway. He says he knows David. He says he's here to collect the collateral." "What collateral?" I asked, gripping the phone. Monica's next words made my blood freeze and changed the game from a legal battle to a life-and-death standoff.
"He says the collateral is the house, Joyce," sobbed Monica into the phone. "He says David signed the deed over to him last week. He says he owns the place." I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My son hadn't just stolen money. He had forged my signature to sell my home out from under me to a loan shark. "Lock the door, Monica," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Call 911. I'm on my way." I hung up and dialed 911 myself. "I have a trespasser at 42 Oak Street. He is threatening the residents, and there is a case of high-level identity theft in progress." I drove back to the house I had bought with Frank 40 years ago. When I turned the corner, my stomach dropped. A massive black SUV was parked on my lawn, right on top of my flower beds. A man the size of a vending machine was pounding on my front door with a fist like a hammer. "Open up, Dave," the man roared. "You can't hide in there. I got the paper." I didn't get out of the car. I wasn't stupid. I parked 3 houses down and waited. 2 minutes later, the blue lights flashed. 2 squad cars screeched to a halt. Officers swarmed the lawn. They pulled the giant man away from the door. He didn't fight. He just held up a piece of paper. I stepped out of my car and walked over. I adjusted my blazer. I needed to look like the owner, not a victim. "I'm Joyce Miller," I told the lead officer. "This is my property." The giant man sneered at me. "Not anymore, lady. Your boy signed it over. Collateral for a business loan. He defaulted yesterday." He waved the paper. The officer took the document and looked at it, then at me. "Ma'am, this looks like a quitclaim deed, signed by Joyce Miller." I took the paper. The signature was a shaky scrawl. It looked nothing like my elegant cursive. It looked exactly like David's handwriting when he was trying to rush through homework. "Officer," I said, pulling my driver's license and the real deed from my bag, "compare this signature to my license. That is a forgery. My son forged my name to pay off a gambling debt." The officer looked at the license, then the paper. His face hardened. He turned to the house. "David Miller, come out with your hands up." The front door creaked open. David stepped out. He looked small, pale, and broken. Monica was behind him, crying into her hands. "Mom," David croaked, "I was going to win it back, I swear. It was just a temporary fix." "Forgery is not a fix, David," I said coldly. "It's a felony." The officers didn't hesitate. They spun David around and slapped the handcuffs on him. The click of the metal was louder than the sirens. My son, the boy I used to read bedtime stories to, was being arrested on my front lawn. The loan shark's enforcer spat on the ground, got back in his SUV, and drove off. He knew the deed was worthless now, but he also knew David was finished. "Mom, please," David cried as they shoved him into the back of the cruiser. "Don't let them take me. Tell them it was a mistake. I'm your son." I stood there watching him. A tear finally rolled down my cheek, but I didn't wipe it away. "You made your choice, David. You bet the house, you lost." The police car pulled away with my son in the back seat. The silence returned to the neighborhood. I turned to Monica. She was standing on the porch, shivering in the cold night air. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. She thought she was safe because she wasn't the one in handcuffs. She thought she was just the innocent victim of David's madness. But as I walked up the driveway, I remembered the bank notifications, the baby store, the Uber Eats. "Get inside," I told her. We walked into the living room. The TV was off. The house was dark because the power was still cut. The only light came from the street lamps outside. "Joyce," Monica whispered,
I didn't know. I swear I didn't know he gambled the house. Maybe you didn't know about the deed, I said, sitting down in one of the dining chairs, but you knew about the money. You spent it too. No, Stop lying, I cut her off. I saw the credit card statements, but that's not what we need to talk about right now. I leaned forward, the shadows covering my face. When the police took David, he shouted something from the car window that you probably hoped I didn't hear, but I heard it. And if what he said is true, Monica, you aren't just homeless, you're in much bigger trouble than him. Monica's face went completely white. She backed away until she hit the wall. What did he say?" she stammered. I looked her dead in the eye. He said the baby isn't real.
Monica stared at me, her back pressed against the wall. The silence in the dark living room was heavy, broken only by the distant wail of the police siren fading away with my son inside. "He's lying!" Monica finally shrieked. "He's just trying to hurt me because I didn't get in the car with him. I am pregnant, Joyce! How dare you!" She wrapped her arms protectively around her stomach, looking at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar, but I wasn't an audience member anymore. I was the critic. This is where the story truly begins. Before we dive in, what time is it where you are? Which country are you watching from? Leave a comment and let me know. And please hit that like button and subscribe to become part of Mama Joyce's Chronicles community for more inspiring stories. "Prove it," I said. My voice was flat. "What?" Monica blinked, dropping her hand slightly. "Prove it," I repeated, taking a step closer. "You said you need this living room for a nursery. You said you're 4 months along. Show me the ultrasound. Show me a doctor's appointment confirmation on your phone. Show me anything other than your word, because your word just left in handcuffs." You can't ask me that. It's medical privacy." She was stammering now, her eyes darting toward the front door. "I'm not the government, Monica. I'm the woman whose house you're standing in, the house you tried to steal." I turned away from her and walked toward the nursery, the room that used to be my sewing room. Monica had made such a big show of painting it last week. She had forbidden me from entering, saying the fumes were bad for my old lungs. "Don't go in there!" Monica screamed, chasing after me. I didn't stop. I pushed the door open. The moonlight streamed in through the window. The room was painted a soft gray. There was a crib in the corner, a changing table, and stacks of boxes labeled diapers, clothes, and toys. It looked perfect. It looked like a dream waiting to happen. I walked over to the stack of diaper boxes. Monica was in the doorway, breathing hard. "See? We bought everything. We were getting ready." I reached out and pushed the top box. It didn't slide heavy with supplies. It flew off the stack as if it weighed nothing. It hit the floor with a hollow thud. I kicked the next box. Empty. I walked to the crib. It was just a cardboard cutout display, a prop from a store window, held up by tape. I turned to face her. "It's a set," I said. "It's a stage set. Just like your marriage, just like your pregnancy." Monica's face changed. The fear vanished. The tears dried up instantly. Her posture straightened, and the hand clutching her belly dropped to her side. She looked at me with a cold, hard sneer that sent shivers down my spine. "David was an amateur," she said, her voice completely different. "No more whining, no more victimhood. I told him we needed to make it look real if we wanted you to sign the house over willingly. The grandma angle is always the strongest hook." "So there is no baby?" I stated. "Of course not," she laughed, a dry, ugly sound. She reached under her shirt and unhooked something. She pulled out a small foam-padded cushion and tossed it onto the floor next to the empty boxes.
Kids are expensive and loud. We just needed the space and the money. I looked at the foam pad on the floor. It was the final insult. They hadn't just stolen my money, they had weaponized my hope. They played on my desire to be a grandmother just to rob me blind. Get out, I said. Get your things. Get out of my house now. Or what? Monica crossed her arms. You gonna call the cops again? Go ahead. I didn't forge any signature. David did. I didn't steal the money. David did. I'm just a poor, deceived wife who has established residency in this home for 3 years. You can't kick me out without a 30-day court order, Joyce. You know the law. She smirked. She thought she had me checkmated. She thought she could live in my house, eat my food, and sleep in my bed for another month while I rotted in a hotel. You're right, I said, walking past her into the hallway. I can't physically throw you out tonight. The law protects squatters. I walked to the basement door. Where are you going? Monica asked, her voice faltering slightly. The fuse box is down there. You can't turn the power back on until I say so. I opened the basement door and looked back at her. The darkness of the stairs seemed to swallow the light from the hallway. I'm not going to the fuse box, Monica, I said softly. I'm going to check on the other thing David was hiding. You see, when the police arrested him, he didn't just scream about the baby. He tried to make a deal. He told them there was something in the basement, something he was holding for that loan shark. Monica's smirk vanished. Her face went gray. She took a stumbling step back. He told them? She whispered. He did. I lied. I had no idea what was down there, but seeing her reaction, I knew I had hit the bullseye. And if I were you, I continued, I wouldn't be worried about eviction. I'd be worried about who comes looking for it now that David is gone. I started to walk down the stairs. Monica screamed, "No, don't go down there," and lunged at me. But she wasn't trying to stop me from seeing it. She was trying to get to it first. And what we found at the bottom of those stairs was far more dangerous than a fake pregnancy or a forged deed.
Monica scrambled past me, her bare feet slapping against the wooden steps as she plunged into the pitch-black basement. She didn't care about the dark. She cared about the money. "Don't you touch it, Joyce!" she screamed from the bottom of the stairs, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "That bag is our ticket out of here!" I stood on the landing, my hand resting on the doorknob. I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. I just listened. Below me, the beam of a cell phone flashlight cut through the darkness. I heard the sound of boxes being shoved aside, metal scraping on concrete. Monica was tearing apart the utility room, looking for David's stash. "Got it!" she shouted triumphantly. I heard the heavy zip of a duffel bag. "Oh my God! David, you idiot! You beautiful idiot!" She sounded breathless. "There's 50 grand in here easily, and packages. Joyce, stay out of my way. I'm leaving." She came charging up the stairs, the heavy bag thumping against her legs. She was panting, fueled by adrenaline and greed. She saw me silhouetted in the doorway at the top of the stairs. "Move!" she snarled, her face lit up by her phone light, looking like a ghost. "I'm walking out that door, and if you try to stop me, I swear to God." "I won't stop you," I said calmly. I stepped back out of the doorway into the hallway. Monica's eyes widened in confusion for a split second. She didn't understand why I was giving up. She surged forward to the top step. But before she could cross the threshold, I grabbed the heavy oak door and slammed it shut. Wham! I turned the deadbolt. Click. It was the same lock Frank had installed when David was a toddler to keep him from falling down the stairs.
It was solid brass. "No!" Monica screamed from the other side. She threw her body weight against the door. Thud. The wood groaned, but it held. "Open this door! Open it right now! You can't do this!" "I just did," I said, leaning my forehead against the cool wood. "You wanted to find what David was hiding? Now you can sit with it." "I have rights!" she shrieked. She was pounding on the door with her fists now. "This is kidnapping!" "No, Monica," I replied, pulling my phone out of my pocket. "Kidnapping is taking a person. I just detained a burglar in possession of illegal contraband." I dialed 911 again. "Yes, dispatcher? This is Joyce Miller at 42 Oak Street again. You just took my son. Well, his accomplice is currently locked in my basement, and she's holding a bag of what looks like narcotics and unregistered cash. I think you'd better send the boys back." For the next 10 minutes, I stood in the hallway, guarding the door. Monica went through the 5 stages of grief in record time. First, denial, "Well, you're joking." Then anger, "I'll kill you." Then bargaining, "Joyce, we can split it 50-50. Then depression, sobbing, and finally, silence. When the police returned, they didn't knock. They came in with guns drawn. "Step away from the door, ma'am." I unlocked the deadbolt and stepped aside. 2 officers rushed down the stairs. I heard a scream, a struggle, and then the distinct sound of handcuffs ratcheting tight. They dragged Monica up the stairs. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was limp, sobbing, her mascara running down her face. One officer carried the black duffel bag. He looked inside and whistled low. "Good call, ma'am," he said to me. "This isn't just a little stash. This is distribution weight." They marched Monica out the front door, right past the spot where she had thrown my chair in the mud. She looked at me one last time. Her eyes weren't arrogant anymore. They were empty. "He made me do it," she whispered. "Nobody makes you do anything," I said. "You chose the shortcut. Now you have to walk the long way home." The squad car lights faded into the distance. The house was finally silent. No TV, no screaming, no David, no Monica. I was alone. I walked into the kitchen. My legs felt like jelly. I poured a glass of water and drank it in one gulp. I looked around at the mess, the open fridge, the torn papers, the mud on the floor. It was a disaster zone, but it was my disaster zone. I thought the war was over. I thought I had won. I picked up the stack of mail Monica had hidden in the pantry, intending to sort through it and start the cleanup. I shuffled through the envelopes, past due notices, credit card offers, and then a thick brown envelope from a life insurance company. I frowned. I didn't have a policy with this company. I tore it open. My eyes scanned the document, and my heart stopped beating for a second. It was a policy on my life, taken out 6 months ago. The benefit amount was $1 million. The beneficiary was David Miller. But that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was the letter clipped to the front of the policy, a letter from the insurance adjuster. "Dear Mr. Miller, regarding your inquiry about the accidental death clause and payout timelines." I dropped the paper. The room spun. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were researching how to speed up the process. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. I needed to sit down. I needed to call Bob. But before I could move, the front door, which I had just locked, rattled. Then came a heavy, distinct knock. 3 slow, hard raps. I froze. The police were gone. The neighbors were asleep. A deep voice, muffled by the wood but clear enough to hear, drifted through the door. "Mrs. Miller, open up.
We need to talk about the bag your daughter-in-law just lost and the money your son still owes." The loan shark hadn't left. He was watching. And now that the police had the drugs, he wanted a replacement for his lost investment, and he decided that the replacement was me. The heavy knock on the door vibrated through the floorboards and up into my bones. The voice on the other side was low, gravelly, and expecting obedience. "Mrs. Miller, we aren't done." I stood in the hallway, clutching the life insurance policy that proved my son wanted me dead for a payout. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I took a deep breath. I looked at the deadbolt I had just thrown. It was strong, but the man outside was stronger. I had two choices: cower in the corner and wait for them to kick it in, or show them that this old lady wasn't helpless prey. I walked right up to the door. I didn't open it. I put my mouth close to the wood. "The police just left," I said, my voice loud and steady, but the detective gave me a direct line. "He's still on the block filling out paperwork. Do you want me to call him back, or do you want to get in your car and drive away?" Silence from the porch. "Your son owes us," the man growled. "He lost our product." "My son is in a holding cell," I shot back. "Go collect from him. He has a lot of free time right now." I paused, then played my ace card. "And listen to me closely. I have a Ring doorbell camera. It's been recording since you pulled up. Your face, your license plate, and your threat are already in the cloud. If you touch this door, the video goes to the police and the FBI. Is 50 grand worth 20 years in federal prison?" I held my breath. It was a bluff. I didn't have a Ring camera. I had a busted doorbell from 1998. The silence on the porch stretched out for 10 agonizing seconds. Then I heard a heavy sigh. "Tell David he's a dead man walking," the voice said. Then heavy boots stomped down the porch steps. A car door slammed. Tires screeched against the asphalt. I slumped against the door, sliding down until I hit the floor. My legs gave out. I wasn't a hero. I was a 60-year-old payroll manager who just wanted to watch her shows. But tonight, I had fought off a squatter, a thief, and a shark. I looked down at the insurance paper in my hand. Beneficiary, David Miller. Tears finally came. Not tears of fear, but tears of grief. I was mourning the son I thought I had. The boy who made me macaroni art was dead. The man who replaced him was a monster who was willing to let me die, or maybe even help me die, to cover his bets. I sat there for an hour in the dark hallway. Then the sun began to peek through the transom window. The light hit the dust motes dancing in the air. I stood up. My knees popped. I wiped my face. "Enough," I said to the empty house. I walked into the kitchen and picked up the phone. I dialed Bob. "Joyce? It's 6 a.m. "I know. I want to file a restraining order against David and Monica. Permanent. And Bob, I want to rewrite my will. Today." "Okay," Bob said softly. "Who is the new beneficiary?" "Nobody," I said. "Donate every cent to a charity for gambling addiction and the local animal shelter. At least the dogs are loyal." "Consider it done." I hung up. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning. I scrubbed the mud from the floors. I threw out the nursery boxes. I bagged up Monica's clothes and left them on the curb for the trash collectors. I reclaimed my space, inch by inch. By noon, the house smelled like lemon polish again. It was quiet. It was mine. I thought it was over. I thought I could finally rest. But at 1 p.m., my phone rang. It was a collect call from the county jail. It has the message, "You have a call from an inmate, David Miller. Press 1 to accept." I stared at the phone. My thumb hovered over the button.
I should hang up. I should block the number. But a small part of me, the mother part that never truly dies, needed to hear his voice one last time. I needed to hear him admit it. I pressed 1. "Mom?" David sounded small, terrified. "Mom, please, you have to post bail. They put me in general pop. I'm scared. I can explain the insurance policy. It wasn't what you think." "I didn't ask about the policy, David," I said coldly. "How did you know I found it?" Silence. He had just told on himself. "Goodbye, David," I said. "Wait, Mom, don't hang up. If you leave me in here, I'm dead. The loan shark has guys on the inside. Mom, please, I have one more thing to tell you, something you don't know." "I know enough." "No," he shouted, "you don't know about Dad. You don't know what Dad left you. Monica found it. It wasn't just the money in the safe. It's under the floorboards in the shed. Mom, it changes everything." I hesitated. Was it a lie? Another manipulation? Or was it the truth? "What about the shed?" I asked. "Come visit me," he begged. "Just one visit. I'll tell you where it is. Then you never have to see me again. Please." I looked out the window at the old garden shed in the backyard. Frank used to spend hours in there. He said he was tinkering. "One visit," I said. "Tomorrow morning, and if you're lying, David, I will personally drive the getaway car for the loan shark." I hung up. I looked at the shed. It was locked with a rusted padlock I hadn't opened in 10 years. David was desperate, but he sounded terrified. The next morning, I put on my best blazer and drove to the jail. I sat behind the thick glass partition. David walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He picked up the phone. "You came," he whispered. "Talk," I said. "What is under the floorboards?" David leaned in, his eyes darting around to make sure the guards weren't listening. He whispered 3 words that turned my entire understanding of my husband and my life upside down. And suddenly, the fight for the house seemed like small potatoes compared to the secret Frank had taken to his grave. David leaned close to the glass, his breath fogging up the partition. He looked desperate, like a drowning man reaching for a log. "Dad didn't trust banks," he whispered. "He didn't trust me either. He told me once, when he was sick, that if things ever got really bad, I should look under the 3rd plank in the shed. He said it was the doomsday box. Mom, there's gold in there, real gold, enough to pay off the sharks, enough to get me out. You have to find it." I stared at him. My husband, Frank, the man who wore the same flannel shirt for 10 years, had a secret stash of gold? It sounded like a fairy tale, or a desperate lie. "If this is a lie, David," I said, my voice steady, "I won't just leave you in here. I'll forget you exist." "It's true," he begged. "Go look, then come back and post my bail. Please, Mom, I'm your son." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I hung up the phone. I walked out of the jail into the bright sunshine. The air tasted sweet, unlike the stale air inside. I drove home. The house was quiet. I walked to the backyard. The shed stood in the corner, covered in ivy. I took a hammer from the garage and smashed the rusted padlock. The door creaked open. It smelled of oil and sawdust, Frank's smell. I walked to the center of the room. I counted the planks. 1, 2, 3. I wedged the claw of the hammer into the gap and pulled. The wood groaned, then popped up. My heart hammered in my chest. David wasn't lying. Sitting in the dirt was a heavy army green metal box. I hauled it out. It was heavy. I wiped the dirt off the lid and undid the latches. Inside, nestled in velvet, were stacks of gold coins, Krugerrands, dozens of them, and on top of the gold lay a white envelope with my name on it, Joyce. I opened the letter, Frank's handwriting. Dearest Joyce, if you are reading this, I am gone, and if you found this box, it means David is in trouble. I love our boy, but he has a hole in his hand where money falls through. I tried to teach him, but he always wanted the shortcut. This box is not for him. This box is for you. It is your safety net. If David is asking for this money to fix a mess he made, do not give it to him. If you bail him out, he will never learn to swim. Keep the gold. Buy yourself peace. Love, Frank. I sat on the dusty floor of the shed and cried. Frank knew. He knew years ago. He had protected me from beyond the grave. I looked at the gold. It was worth a fortune. Enough to pay the loan shark? Yes. Enough to bail David out? Easily. But then I reread the line. If you bail him out, he will never learn to swim. I closed the box. I stood up. I walked back into the house and called Bob. Bob, I said, I found something. I want to deposit it into a secure trust. Beneficiary, Joyce Miller. And David? Bob asked. He called my office begging for bail. I looked at the empty space where my green recliner used to be. I thought about the fake nursery, the life insurance policy, the forgery. David is exactly where he needs to be. Do not post bail. Let the state handle him. Understood, Bob said. I could hear the smile in his voice. The next few months were a blur of activity, but the good kind. Monica took a plea deal. She got 5 years for possession with intent to distribute. She sent me a letter once blaming David. I burned it without reading past the first line. David was sentenced to 8 years for fraud, forgery, and grand larceny. The loan shark was arrested a month later on unrelated RICO charges. The threat was gone. I sold the gold coins. I used the money to renovate the house my way. I tore down the wall to the nursery and expanded my master suite. I bought a brand new recliner, leather this time, with a built-in massager. I painted the living room a soft, warm peach. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new chair, sipping hot tea. The house was clean. The bills were paid. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was golden. My phone rang. It was a collect call from prison. I looked at the screen. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel guilt. I just felt done. I pressed the block caller button. I picked up the remote control, the one Monica had snatched from my hand that first night. I turned on the TV. I found a cooking show about Italian desserts. I turned the volume up just a little, exactly how I liked it. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I wasn't a victim. I was Joyce. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just living in the house. I owned the remote control to my own destiny. And that is where our story ends. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a quiet cup of tea in a room that finally belongs to you. Thank you so much for watching my story. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe to Mama Joyce's Chronicles for more stories about strength, survival, and karma. I have a brand new story coming tomorrow that will shock you even more. Click the video on your screen now to keep watching. See you there.